Welcome to the Punting is Winning podcast. Just two fans talking all things Hawkeyes. Here are your hosts, JD and Keith.
Welcome back, Hawkeye fans, to Punting is Winning, the All-Iowa podcast where we talk Hawkeye sports. I'm your co-host, Keith, with my co-host, JD.
Hello.
We'll call this take two. We've already recorded once on this one, and that didn't turn out very well, so we'll see what we can do here. Last week, we asked you, the question of the week was, who had the longest field goal in Kinnick Stadium history? And since that was your question, I will let you go ahead and reveal the answer, and I'll tell you what my thoughts were going
You don't have
into.
to go. Yeah, you don't have to go back very far for this one. This was September 30th of 2023, right before the end of the half. In fact, the last play of the half in the first half, Iowa, Michigan State. Johnny Kim lines up for a 58-yarder, and he drilled it. 58 yards. That's the answer. Johnny Kim from Michigan State. There you go.
1 yard longer than Marshall Kane.
1 yard longer than Marshall Kane, who holds the Iowa record. And I think he might be tied with somebody. I'd have to look that up.
Probably the guy that I had thought, if I remember right, I looked it up. I think he had a 57-yarder at Iowa City as well. But the person I thought was Chip Lowmiller from Minnesota. And when I went back and did a little research, I did find out that he did kick a 62-yarder against Iowa, but that was in the Dome. So I was kind of on the right track, and I think he might have had a 57-yarder at Iowa City. I don't know. I think the one he kicked in Minnesota or in Minneapolis was in 1986, but I still think Iowa won that game up there. I don't remember if it was 87. Maybe he kicked one in Iowa City that was 57, but I could be wrong.
Well, he went on to have a pretty
85.
good career, I tell you that. He kicked for the Redskins for years and years, and was pretty well known, very highly touted, did a good job. So,
yeah, I would agree. Being a Redskins fan, he definitely kicked us into some games and kept us in some games in those late 80s, early 90s, back when Washington was actually pretty decent.
Yeah, back when they were called wow.
Well, and I think they might be called out again. I think that actually the Native American Heritage Society is kind of getting a little aggravated by the fact that they changed the name, because that emblem on the side of their helmet was actually a real life drawing of a chief of their tribe, and it was paying honor to him, and they are a little upset by the fact that that's not being used anymore. So I think that might be changed. I've always been a proponent of government should stay out of professional sports. I think they stuck their nose in where they didn't need to be on that, and I'll leave it at that. I think they've done the same thing in Cleveland, because why is Redskins not acceptable, but Chiefs and Braves and Blackhawks are?
Yeah, I don't want to get into political things because you and I are on opposite sides of that deal, but maybe things will start swinging back.
Yep, new ownership, and I'm cautiously optimistic about the new ownership as well. So
yeah,
I think they're doing some of the right things. Enough about the professional side. We'll have a little bit of a fun show today. We wanted to do a show where we grabbed the all Kirk Ferentz team offense. We want to do first and second team offense. And the criteria that we laid out was 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs. I think we misunderstood because I don't think you pulled any fullbacks, but I did. And then 4 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, 10 offensive linemen at any position. Does not have to be at their normal position. So I didn't want you to go and pick, 4 tackles, 4 guards, 2 centers. Just pick the top 10 offensive linemen. And then we also threw kickers in there as well. They are an offensive weapon, in my opinion. Punters we put on the defensive side. So when we do the defense, we'll do punters and returners at that point. But for this one, we will do first and second team. I didn't really follow my own formula very well either, because I do have a couple of slashes in there as well, because I just couldn't pick between 2 guys at a couple spots. So we'll start out with the quarterback, and I'll let you go ahead and tell me who your number one.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a no-brainer for us in the Ferentz era. It's Brad Banks.
Yeah.
2001, 2002, and he started 2002. If I remember right, he was a transfer in from Florida somewhere. And
Central Florida. It came from a JUCO down in Mississippi, I think.
Okay,
Or
yeah, he's
maybe it
from
was JUCO down in
Plantation,
Florida.
maybe.
I don't remember. Yeah.
So
it was a junior college.
Yeah, he had a lot of accolades. Second in Heisman. He had the let's see here, National Player of the Year, Davey O'Brien winner. He had a lot of accolades and a lot of awards.
Big Ten Player of the Year.
Yeah,
Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer. He's the only one out of the Kirk Ferentz era as a quarterback that's gotten that far as the awards. He was a very dynamic player, and I'd like to see Iowa go back to a style like that in the future. But and I don't know why, with the success that Iowa had in 2002, that they didn't look at that and say, "Wow, that might be a winning combination to go with a quarterback that actually can run and can get yards with running the ball and taking it. If he's fading back to pass and the pocket collapses and he runs out and gets 15, 20 yards, runs out of bounds." As opposed to the standstill quarterback that stands back there and gets sacked for a 10-yard loss.
Yeah, that's a whole new definition of the Statue of Liberty.
Exactly.
Just the wrong type of play that you want to run there. I also had Brad Banks as my number one. It's I don't think there's too many Iowa fans that would disagree with that as their number one of the Kirk Ferentz era. It'd be awful hard to find an argument for somebody to be better than that. I mean, you might throw in Rick Stanzi just because of more longevity as far as his career at Iowa, but I think from a success standpoint, Brad Banks makes the most sense, even if it was just a 1-year player. He did have a little bit of play in the 2001 season. Looked decent. You could tell that he probably was a year away at that point as far as his decision making, but I think you saw it in that 2001 season, those few games. I know he was in a Michigan game in 2001 that Iowa lost by touchdown or less. Game that they probably could have won and looked like they might have been able to win, but I know he got in on that game as well. But I think he ran out of bounds. If I remember right, he ran out of bounds on a third down or a fourth down, just short of the sticks, and instead of taking the hit. So I think that kind of was like, you could tell that the decision making would need a little bit of improvement, but the athletic ability was definitely there.
Oh yeah, he was definitely athletic enough. That's for sure.
My number 2 was Nate Stanley, and the reason for that is Nate Stanley is the number 2 overall quarterback in Iowa history for touchdown passes, second only to Chuck Long. That's pretty high company to be in my opinion. And Nate Stanley was never a guy that was ever overly flashy, but was very, very solid. He'd do the job. Might have aggravated some people at times, but he did some things that I didn't think he could do. I think back to the Ohio State game in, 2017, where he's being tackled or he's wrapped up around the ankles and he just delivers a dart to Hawkinson in the end zone for a touchdown right there. I think it might have been early third quarter. And I was just like, how do you make that play? You've got to be an exceptional athlete to be able to make that play and be able to stand in there with that guy draped around your ankle and be able to deliver a ball that way. So
yeah, I too have Stanley as my number, or not Stanley. I have Stanley as my number 2. He had several Player of the Week awards, 3-0 in bowl games.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, second only in passing touchdowns to Chuck Long. I mean, it's just, I could have went with Stanzi too. He would be a close third. Like what the knock on Rick Stanzi was that he had to throw an interception return for a touchdown before it could actually get started. Yep. And we can't be starting out the game 7-0, down 7-0 every time. So that's why I have him sitting at number 3 and not number 2.
Yeah, I would agree. He was floating in my mind at number 2 between him and probably CJ Beathard. Just from a success standpoint, and that's nothing against Drew Tate either. Drew Tate was a good quarterback at Iowa, and he'll forever be remembered as the guy that threw the pass in the Capital One Bowl with Warren Holloway, and that you'll never deny that glory to him, but I just feel like Nate Stanley's career overall was just over a little bit better. He had a little more time to show it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Good player.
Yeah. Moving on to the running backs. I'm sure we'll both have the same number one here. I'll let you go
I went
ahead.
with Sean Green, number 6 in Heisman voting in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Doak Walker Award winner. I mean, this guy had virtually all of the awards from a running standpoint. Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year in 2008, All-American. Just anytime he got the ball, he could break it and go for. I remember a game against Wisconsin. He just went crazy at 216 yards, I think, on like 22 rushes. And I think there was a couple of them that were 55 and 65 yards, and he just ran away from people. And,
I think the one I remember the most is I think it was a 45-yard run where he broke 4, 5, 6 tackles in there and kind of pirouetted into the end zone.
Yeah,
that's the one that I remember the most.
Just a really quality running back. I know he sat out a year. He was in Iowa, I think 2005, 2006, and then skipped 2007. Had some troubles, and it came back in 2008 and really looked great. And really good, solid guy right there. Good running back.
Yep. And I would agree. I had him as my number one as well. I think we differed on our number twos slightly. You went with a little older school, but not too much older than where I was at.
I went with Liddell Betts. Yeah, Liddell Betts, number 2 rushing. Super, super good. I mean, he needed a 4th down run. He got it. And he played from 98 to 2001. So he got he got the last bit of the Fry era and got the first of the Ferentz era. And he was number 2 on the all-time rushing list for Iowa for career. So that's why I have him at number 2.
Yeah, and a former Redskin at that as well.
Yeah, played in the NFL, had some quality years in the NFL.
Yeah, I actually went a little bit different direction. I went with Fred Russell as my number 2. Could have gone with several. There's been so many really good running backs come through Iowa in the Kirk Ferentz era. But I just felt like Fred Russell was just that. He was the capstone of that 2002 as well with Brad Banks. Brad Banks with his ability to break out of the pocket and make something with his feet or pass downfield. But Fred Russell was the go-to running back. And that was kind of a good 1-2 combination. And the whole 2002 team, there was talent galore.
So many good players
on that team. So you could pull an all-Ferentz team out of that 2002 team pretty easily.
Absolutely. A lot of them that we have on our list actually were 2002 players.
Yes, that is true. So I know I did fullbacks. I know you did not do fullbacks.
No.
For me, fullbacks, my number 1 was Edgar Cervantes. I believe that was also in the 2002 era.
Yeah.
Just a solid back, unheralded. You didn't hear a whole lot about him. Did catch a few balls out of the backfield, but I've always said as a fullback, if you're not being talked about, you're probably doing your job. As my number 2, I went with a slash on this one because I couldn't really pick between the two. I felt they were both equal quality of being a number 2. I went with Tom Bush and Jeremy Allen. Now, Jeremy Allen being Kirk Ferentz's first year, I believe, was his only year at Iowa. I think his first year or his final year at Iowa was 99. So not a lot of the Ferentz era in him. And then Tom Bush was in that, I want to say the 2006, 7, 8, 9 seasons. But just a very quality guy. And, as Hayden Fry would have probably described him as a rolling ball of butcher knives or something like that. And a fun guy to tailgate with because we'd see him in the lots after the game and he'd give you the time of day and he'd talk to you. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. Of course, being a fan, anytime that the players interact with you, it's special. So let's move on to our wide receivers. I broke this into a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 position with a 1 and 2 in each of those. Um, and I think you did it more as just top 4 wide receivers.
Yeah, wide receiver split ends. How I ran
So
it.
my wide receiver number 1 was Marvin McNutt. To me, Marvin McNutt has been the best complete wide receiver in the Ferentz era, and ironic considering it was a converted quarterback. A lot of the guys that played wide receiver for Iowa were converted from a different position. Quarterbacks, maybe even a running back that switched out to the slot or something to that effect. Or sometimes you get a defensive back that switches to the offensive side because he has better hands than you thought. But yeah, Marvin McNutt, a certain plays stand out in my head. That what was it, about 88 to 90 yard pass against Indiana in 2009 when Iowa was fighting our way back. Rick Stanzi did not have a very good first 3 quarters, but he had a phenomenal fourth quarter. So yeah, Marvin McNutt, all Big Ten wide receiver. What else can you say? If you've watched Iowa football in the last 25 years, the name Marvin McNutt will come up in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. My number 1, I went with Emir Smith-Marset. Basically, for just the utilitarianism, he could do anything. He was so versatile. Run back kickoffs, could run from the end position and do end arounds. He could do handoffs. He could do the wide receiver screens over the middle.
And he proved he could pass too.
He could throw the
Holiday
ball.
Bowl.
Yeah, he could. He just had all the tools to play, and he is. I want to say he's still in the NFL.
He's at Carolina, somewhere. I believe.
Yeah,
I think he's stuck up with Carolina.
He's doing very, very well for himself. And my number 2, I also went with Marvin McNutt, and I could have put him number 1. He's number 3 on the all-time receivers list or receptions list at Iowa. I mean, what can you say? Everybody remembers this, the 7-got-6 Stanzi to McNutt, Michigan State game. And that was just one example of what he did. Complete receiver, very smart when it comes to the game. You can't say enough good things about what Marvin McNutt did for Iowa. And, he's a great Hawkeye and always will be. And I doubt he'll ever have to buy a beer in the state of Iowa.
Would hope not.
I would hope not.
My wide receiver 1, number 2 I went with DJK. And let me preface this by saying I broke my wide receivers into 2 different types. So you had your outside threats and you had your more possession slot type receivers as my receiver 2. So that's why I say wide receiver 1, number 2 was DJK. I also have a slash with him and Emir Smith-Marset as well. DJK is the number 2 overall receiver in Iowa history. I know his final game of his career and missing the bowl game is probably a little bit of a tarnish on his legacy at Iowa, but I don't think it should be. I think what he did and throughout those 4 years, a lot of people said he was in Ferentz's doghouse. I don't believe that. I just, I think it's a situation where, I don't even want to get into the situation with it. I think he was a phenomenal player for Iowa, and that's what we should remember him as Hawkeyes, not anything other than that. He gave his 4 years to the university, and ever appreciative of that as a fan.
Yeah, I went with my number. Well, I call them split ends. Number 1 is Clinton Solomon, also a 2002 player, but more remembered probably for his game against LSU in the Capital One Bowl in 2005, January. Really good player, had a lot of catches, 118, had 14 receptions for touchdowns. Just a quality player, and, he's one of those kind of guys that if you needed a ball caught, he was always very sure-handed. Very few drops, if ever. I don't even remember ever having him have a drop that was an important catch. We needed it.
Yeah, I don't remember that either.
So that's why I have him there. And he's part of that 2002 team that was so talented. Even though he didn't
Yeah,
probably play that much in 02, he probably played more 3, 4, and 5, but he was at least part of that team, and that's why I have him in there.
okay. My number 3, I called this my wide receiver 2. My number 1, I had Ed Hinkle, and I went with this because I looked at him as not so much as a straight possession receiver, because he's not. He had speed. He had, he was a pure wide receiver, but he was so sure-handed. I remember that very first his welcome to the Big Ten moment was that first Big Ten game in 2002 against Penn State as a true freshman, and he makes that stretched out catch in the end zone, just gets his toe down for a touchdown, and and then you fast forward to his senior year, senior day, even against Minnesota. He comes back from a broken forearm, has a soft cast, but he has it on both arms, so you can't tell which one was the bad one. And I think he had 4 or 5 touchdown catches in that game, and Iowa just absolutely steamrolled Minnesota in that game. Not as bad as they did in 2008, but steamrolled them at Iowa City on senior day, and that was I don't ever remember that as the Ed Hinkle game.
Yeah, I kind of remember Ed Hinkle being from, was he from Erie, Pennsylvania?
Erie.
Yeah. And I remember him always having really big games against Penn State. It's like he really got up for Penn State. It's like he felt maybe Penn State slighted him in some form or fashion, and he was going to get back at him. And he always seemed to have really good games against Penn State. Yeah, quality
last
choice.
Years,
really good guy.
Last couple of years being the exception, not the norm.
Yeah. Then my last pick, I went with DJK. Okay. I know you picked him earlier, but same reasons. DJK he's number 2 on the all-time receptions list, behind Cavante Martin Manley, who has one more than he does. So, you can say you don't like him for whatever reason, but he can't deny what he did on the field.
I would agree. We covered that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
My wide receiver 2, number 2, I went with Matt Vandenberg. I went with him just simply because I thought more along the lines of who was clutch, and he was clutch, and especially against Iowa State. He had some of his best games of his career against Iowa State. I remember that 35-3 game, and I think it was 2015, even 2016, something like that. He had catches that I still think back of how did he make that catch? And, so for that reason alone, he's my second team wide receiver 2. Just being able to put it to Iowa State like that and make those types of plays. And if he's listening, I know he's got this podcast with his wife. Hopefully maybe somebody will let him know he's listening, but thank you, Mr. Vandenberg, for your years of service at Iowa, and an unheralded guy coming out of South Dakota too. That's where have we heard that story before?
Chad Greenway.
Yeah. So moving on to the most difficult position.
Yeah.
Tight end. I think difficult in the sense of trying to. Yeah, I think it's difficult in the sense of trying to find the number 2 guy, because I think number 1 is kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think your number 1 and my number 1 are the same. I went with Dallas Clark.
Yeah.
Mackey Award winner, 2002. Consensus All-American, unanimous All-American. What can you say? He went on to have a stellar career. In fact, I'm not be surprised with what he doesn't end up in the Hall of Fame for the NFL for the career he had there. And he had a great career at Iowa. He only had a couple of years at Iowa, but those were very, very good years at Iowa.
Yeah. A walk-on and a converted linebacker at that too.
Right.
Iowa has seemed to have some pretty good luck with people with the last name of Clark.
Yeah. Even though they're spelled differently.
Yeah, but congrats to Caitlin Clark as well on her WNBA All-Star selection and the 19 assists, setting a record the other night. So
not just a rookie record, an actual NBA or
WNBA record
for all people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I also had Dallas Clark as my number 1. Same reasons, just he was a bulldog, and one of the most memorable plays to me was not only the 95-yard touchdown pass against Purdue, but the fourth down catch against Purdue in that same game in the south end zone right there, right in front of us.
We discussed this last week on our greatest games of the Ferentz era.
Yep.
That's one of them.
Yeah. I'll forever remember that. Those are memories that are engraved into my head.
Yep. Me too.
My number 2, I went with a little more recency bias. I know this might surprise, I don't know if it's surprised people, but I went with Sam Laporta. I think Sam Laporta has the all-time record for receptions at Iowa for a tight end. Several guys you could have gone with. There was so many guys to choose at the second tight end position that I felt like he proved it longer because he was here longer. He had the 4 years, coming in and playing as a freshman. He could have gone with Hawkinson, repping the South Central Iowa crew like we are. But he did it basically. It was a year and a half that he did that in, and then went off to the NFL. And again, great player. Don't get me wrong, and very happy to have, I'd consider him probably on that slash line of 2. That would probably be a situation where I'd probably have 3 slashes in there because I couldn't pick a solid guy behind that.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't want on there. Noah Fant, Tony Miliaki, CJ Fedorowicz, George Kittle. There's just so many.
Oddly, George Kittle didn't have the greatest career at Iowa. He went to the NFL and just lit it up. But, he had a solid career, not great. I mean, it was nothing like Hawkinson and Fant and
it wasn't a standout career. It was a solid career.
He was just there and he did a good job. He wasn't not like they have been lately.
Right. He had, in his day, he had Jake Duzey and he had Henry Krieger-Kobel as well. And they were splitting reps between the 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
They were all worthy of being on the field. And, you saw the talent there. There wasn't enough plays and enough reps to go around for everybody. But he's showcasing in the NFL where he needs to, and he's making the bank for that. And that's, again, forever grateful for being a Hawkeye. And
absolutely. And he reps the Hawkeyes every chance he gets.
Oh, absolutely. Well, being married to another Hawkeye helps too.
Yeah.
But
I had as my number 2 tight end, I went with TJ Hawkinson for a lot of the same reasons you did. He's a Southern Iowa kid, grew up in the town, basically about 20 miles west of where I grew up as a kid. So anytime you can have somebody from the area that you grew up in make himself into something is great. So not to diminish anything he did on the field, because he was a very good tight end, and Mackey winner. They only give one of those out a year, and he won it in 2018. So, of all the tight ends in all of NCAA, he was the best that year. And he's playing NFL and on Sundays. And I mean, from a Hawkeye standpoint, that's what more do you want?
Yeah, I'm proud to say that my kids played baseball against him in high school.
Good.
And actually, I want to say one of my boys played baseball against Brandon Myers. When he was
Prairie City?
at Prairie City.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong on that. I don't remember. There's several players that I know that my youngest has played against. One of them just graduated, John Wagner. He played baseball against him in his traveling league. So just an interesting little tidbit, and shout out to my youngest one. And I know my oldest one played against Hawkinson as well in high school when he was at Albion. Hawkinson was at Sheraton.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, let's move on to the offensive lineman. This was a little difficult to pick just 10.
Yeah.
Because, Iowa's known for being producing some great offensive linemen, and I don't think there's not a dud. In my opinion, there's not a dud on my list, and I doubt there's one on yours as well. So I'll go through my top 5. Again, this is in no particular position order, just the top 5 offensive linemen. And this isn't in any particular order of the 5 either. But I went with Robert Gallery, standout member of that 02. He was just a junior. Some people forget that line was senior dominated, and he was just a junior at that time. And then I also had Brandon Sheriff, again, shout out to former Redskin. Marshall Yonda. Hard to not put Marshall Yonda on there based on that one hit and that end around against Iowa State. But for far more, and again, a 2-year player there who came out of junior college. Then I had Tristan Wirfs, which the theme here being these guys have had stellar careers in the NFL so far. And my final number 1 on the offensive line was Tyler Linderbaum, and who is having a great career at Baltimore already. I don't think you can argue with some of those.
No, I have actually all 5 of what you have on my list. I don't necessarily have them in the order you had them in, but you said they weren't in any particular order anyway.
Right.
And I don't have them in that order. I don't have any particular order either. I don't have them like ranked 1 to 10. It's
right.
just 10 guys I think were outstanding in the Kirk Ferentz era. That I didn't rank them. But I've also got Eric Steinbach. I got Brian Bulaga in there.
As do I, and as well as Steinbach.
Bruce Nelson, Riley Reif. I have Austin Blythe. Ike Bacher was one that I wanted to put in, and he was right there on that line. Seth Olson, Austin Blythe. I mean, I could go on. There's so many great offensive linemen that Iowa had. It's just
I also had Riley Reif in there as well, like you did, but I threw in Raphael Eubanks.
Yeah,
and also threw in Larrick Jackson.
Okay.
Again, like you said, there's so many guys that you could have thrown in there. Andy Lightfoot,
Mike Jones,
Porter that was on that 2002 season, Bruce Nelson, Mike Jones, Mike Elgin, Brian Ferentz, James Ferentz. Those guys both were good centers at Iowa. You can't deny. You may not like Brian Ferentz for what happened as an offensive coordinator, but you can't deny his contributions as a player and as a coach there, as a position coach.
Right.
So I think I'd stack those offensive lines up against just about any offensive line. And then I think the last one was probably one of the easier ones to pick was the kickers. Again, there's been several quality kickers that have come through and have done great things at Iowa. I went with Nate Kading as my number 1, and I'm sure you did too.
Yeah, I did.
Gro's a winner, had a great career in the NFL. What more can you say? He had a record for consecutive field goals made. I think he had one record where he went, they basically thought of him as Mr. Automatic.
Mm-hmm.
And when he would miss one, it was like, whoa, there had to be something wrong with the snap or the hold or something, because you just didn't expect it. And I know he had a consecutive streak.
I was all-time leading scorer too.
Yeah, I know he had a consecutive streak of extra points too.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty easy number 1. I think the number 2 got a little cloudier, but I think we're both on the same page with this one as well. I went with Keith Duncan. Yeah, I think Keith Duncan had that clutch gene in him. He was just able to put some daggers in people that makes me happy. Nebraska, Michigan.
Yeah.
When you can do that, that's you're number 1 in my book.
Mm-hmm. He was a Groza finalist, but he didn't. He probably should have won it. I think Rodrigo Blankenship maybe won it that year. He shouldn't have. I think that was kind of a.
I think that was just because Georgia had a little bit better season and he was more prominent in their mind or whatever. But
East Coast bias.
Well, yeah, you call it. I was trying to avoid the euphemism, but it is what it is.
Call it what it is.
But yeah, you could have gone with guys like Daniel Murray, who kicked the field goal to beat Penn State in 2008, or you could have gone with Kyle Schlicker, who was just a extremely solid kicker throughout his career. Miguel Racino's, just whoever you wanted to pick, and and I stayed away from current players because I think they'll have their own legacy in a few years. I want to give them a chance because
I may break that rule when we do defense.
Yeah,
I think we got a guy on our defense currently that deserves to be on the All Ferentz team. But we'll talk about defense in a couple of maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll try to cover Big Ten Media Days this next week and kind of go over what we hear, what we learn from that. It's not going to be a ton of stuff that we're going to learn from it. It's going to be a lot of coach speak.
Right.
But we will sit down and I will probably listen to all 18 coaches over the 3 days just to kind of get an idea of, obviously I already have the coaches that I don't like because I think they're a little too big for their britches, so to speak. One of them just left for the NFL, so we'll see how his replacement is. And I think some of them are just put a little higher on the pedestal than they actually deserve to be because they haven't proven it yet.
Right.
Not gonna mention any names out of Wisconsin or Nebraska, but I think they're put a little bit too high on the pedestal as far as prove it first. You might have proved it at another school, but that's not a Big Ten school. Prove it in the Big Ten, then you'll earn my respect and you'll earn those accolades by the media and the press. I think it's just, it's the hot names. Oh, these guys are going to do great things there. Well, not everybody does. Kirk Ferentz wasn't a name when he came in. Look what he's done. He's the longest tenured head coach in Division I college football right now.
Yeah. Not even close.
And doesn't even get the recognition that he truly deserves. I think a lot of people just give him recognition because of the longevity, but to take a program like Iowa, which is not a blue chip program, and as much as we would want it to be as Hawkeye fans, it's not a blue chip program. It doesn't get the 4 and 5 star recruits that these other schools get.
Yeah.
He gets 2 and 3 star recruits and he builds them into 4 and 5 star recruits by the time they're ready to graduate, and he builds them into better men than football players even.
Yeah, and that plays out when you look at the in the NFL, how many players from each college are currently on rosters. Mm-hmm. And Iowa's usually in the top 10 of that, not in the top 7. Right. So, you take a team of basically 2 and 3 stars and make them eventually, as they graduate, into 4 and 5 star players, even though they don't put star ratings on them at their time of graduation. The NFL does that for you when they draft. So they'll tell you whether they're good or not by their draft status. If they get drafted in one of the rounds, especially the earlier rounds, that tells you how good they really are and how much that they have grown and improved over the years because, the guy came in as a 2-star and he goes out and he's a first-round draft pick.
Yeah. I think
somebody misjudged the talent or this kid really bloomed into his own.
Yeah.
One of the two.
And the one that comes to mind, I think, the most is Jack Campbell. Being a first-round pick. Cooper DeJean, yeah. But I think, just the fact that they were both mid 3-star guys, not really, blue chip teams weren't really knocking on their door. The Ohio States, Michigans, Alabamas weren't knocking on their door. Parents sees in them what they can be. And Cooper DeJean was a quarterback in high school, and he was probably one of the best corners that Iowa's had in recent years, and that's saying a lot when you consider the corners that they've had in recent years.
Yes,
Desmond King and
Riley Moss playing on NFL roster.
Josh
right now.
Jackson.
Yeah,
that's high praise.
Safety, but
Desmond King was a corner. He's a safety in the NFL, but he was a corner.
Okay.
He was a corner.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure those are names that you'll hear again in a couple of weeks. Hint.
Some of them will, yeah.
It's. I think the defense is going to be so difficult.
That is going to be
to
hard.
break that down.
Very hard.
A little more difficult than the offense because I think the offense is a little more. It's easier to predict based on stats. It's easier to say, oh, well, this guy had X amount of catches, so. But how do you do that with defensive linemen? You kind of have to use your eyeballs at that point. You can't go off the stats and say, yeah, this guy had the it factor. And, he may not have been an All-American. By God, I'd want him on my team, and I'd want him on that line every single day.
Yeah.
So, we'll cover that. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. Like I said, next week we'll cover Big Ten Media Days. But as always, like and subscribe if you like the content that we have here.
Question of the week yet, too.
Yep, I'm getting there. Okay. Check us out on the social media, Spotify, Facebook, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, TikTok. We're going to start putting some stuff out on TikTok. And we'd appreciate it if you promoted us as best you can. If you hear you got some friends that might like listening to podcasts, just kind of mention it to them and say, hey, a couple of older guys talking football. If you're interested, you might like it. So, but with that, let's wrap up on a question of the week. The question of the week this week is what I consider Hayden Fry, Kirk Ferentz is what I consider the modern era of Iowa football. It's what has been my lifetime for the most part. And that's pretty easy to say. It's probably a lot of our fans' lifetimes too, because if you've been on this earth for close to 50 years, you've had either Hayden Fry or Kirk Ferentz. 50 years or less, you've had those two only.
Yep.
So what I want to know is who was the first round draft pick of the modern era of Iowa football, the Hayden Fry, Kirk Ferentz era of Iowa football. Who was the first round draft pick? And it will be a name that will surprise you. And if you get it without Googling it and you post that in our comments, we might even try to get you on the show because you probably know more than we do.
Yeah, that one was one that you know this one. Wow. Congratulations.
I knew the name. I remembered the name once I saw it, but I would not have guessed it. I would not have said that was the first one. So there is the question of the week for next week. Who was the first round draft pick? Yes.
You guys can
try
not to Google it. If you don't know, just say, oh man, that's a good question. I don't know. And then you can go Google it and then you can find out for yourself, but don't write it down. Let somebody else, if they know it,
have a chance
to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with that, I think we'll wrap it up and we'll end it up on a rousing Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.